So the Pussycat Dolls are the latest musical act to be struck down by blue dot fever. Now, I hadn't heard about this before, but it's basically like when you go on a Ticketmaster website and you have a look at like the seating map and all of the blue dots are all of the unsold seats. So they've actually just had to cancel their tour. They've come out with a statement saying that they've had to have a really honest look at the North American run. And because of that, they've made the heartbreaking decision to cancel all of the tour dates. Now, when I saw they announced their tour from Australia, I was excited for it. I was like, what a throwback.
I was excited too. I just associate all their songs with, When I Grow Up, Buttons.
Yes. Like I'm 8 years old and I'm like shaking my ass to this song that I don't know.
Inappropriate song.
Yeah, so it's really disappointing to hear that it has been called off, but they're not the only musical act in the past couple of weeks that have had to pause or, cancel their shows. So this follows Post Malone. He's had to shift the dates of his tour. Meghan Trainor has also cancelled, and Zayn. Now, they all have various reasons for why they've had to cancel their tour, but at the end of the day, they weren't really sold out, and the Pussycat Dolls are the only ones who have kind of acknowledged this in their statements. But it really shows a little bit of a shift in how these concerts are coming to life and where people are choosing to spend their money, and it just seems like it's no longer viable to have these big stadium shows because these aren't like small acts. These are like big headliners. They should be selling out these stadiums.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see which of them acknowledge that as the reason that they're cancelling and which don't, because I guess it is a bit of taking a piece of humble pie to be like, we're calling it off because we couldn't fill the seats, as opposed to making up some other reason.
Meghan Trainor was like, I've got to look after my kid. I'm like, that's not a new thing.
Yeah.
You already had
the kid was there.
You already had your kid.
And didn't Post Malone say he needed to release more music?
He
was
needs
working
more time. See, he's only shifted his by like 3 weeks, but I'm assuming that leg of the tour just like wasn't doing that well. So I guess it's an interesting look at people's willingness when it comes to investing in these big shows and festivals and things like that, alongside these like surging ticket prices. Like, how many acts can you go to in 1 year? Say your favorite artist is coming that year. Are you going to be able to go to 3 shows? Probably not. Like the cost of tickets is so expensive now.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've sort of found this in your group chats and in your circles, that it used to be someone's coming, when are we going? That was more the vibe. Whereas I think now people are really reserving.
No one replies. I'm like, who wants to go? No one replies.
Is it blue dot phenomenon?
Yeah.
But you just kind of now have to save that for when, your top few favorite artists come, and, most people are only probably going to 1 or 2 a year.
Totally. And I guess in Australia, we get so many less acts coming over because of the supply and demand and like the physical logistics to make it all the way over here. It just isn't viable to do those big stadium shows. So for us, when acts do come over, we're met with those really high costs. And again, for the group chat, no, not everybody can go.
You're just picturing when they're sitting around planning out their tour dates, they must be like, do we do Australia? Like, it's just so far away. And when you think about something like the Eras tour or those huge sets that they then have to transport everywhere, that's a huge cost for them.
So in Australia, it really impacts how artists are touring locally. For a lot of those major international tours, there are higher logistic costs involved. And, when you come out of a concert and you see those big trucks outside, they're packing up the stage. They're getting everything from production into those trucks and then going from Sydney to Melbourne, and there's a huge cost involved. So they're often putting a lot of attention into the places that they're going to be able to quickly roll out when they're in Australia. So you can understand if you were going to add, an Adelaide and a Perth leg on top of Sydney and Melbourne, you would be driving, you'd be on the road for days. So it's not like in the States where you can kind of pack up and like do your shows. Australia has so much ground to cover. So it does make sense that, they do focus their time on a Sydney or a Melbourne, but it's such a shame because so many other states and so many people are missing out.
I know, and the other states do really get up in arms about it. Like if you speak to someone from Perth or Brisbane during the Eras tour, very upset.
Oh my God.
Because they have to factor in so much more to be able to come to something like that.
Yeah, totally. And there obviously are exceptions to the rule. Foo Fighters, who have historically loved coming to Australia, they've done one night only shows in Tasmania. They've done Geelong before, but that is like not the norm.
I know. I was living in Melbourne when they did the Geelong tour, and I still remember everyone being like, I'm going to the Foo Fighters this weekend. Hour and a half drive there. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Where are they doing it?
And there are obviously acts that come over, like Bad Bunny came over and he did 2 Sydney shows, and they were obviously massive sellout shows. But because he was only in Sydney, you've obviously got people flying in from all over the country just in order to be there and see him. So it's kind of the people at the top, you have Taylor Swift. People are fighting for those tickets. Like there are like hundreds of thousands of people waiting in a queue to buy those tickets when she announces a tour. But there's like that middle ground where your acts like the Pussycat Dolls are just like not able to get it across the line anymore.
I know, it is interesting to think about because when we were initially chatting about them, we were both like, oh, it's so exciting that they're coming here. And then you were like, would you actually get a ticket to go and see the Pussycat Dolls? And I was like, I don't know. I do like some of their old songs, but also the reunion isn't all of the original members as well. I believe it's 3 of the original band.
And isn't there like 24 of them?
Yeah, true. They can't get them all together.
Yeah.
Girls on tour.
I don't know if I would actually be putting money into seeing the Pussycat Dolls.
I know, it is sort of the girl math of, do I put it into this year's budget even though it's so far away? And I think the problem is these days the cost of living is so high. So you're really focusing what you can spend on a few key performers that maybe you're really passionate about. And we sort of saw the knock-on effect of someone like Adele coming to Australia a while ago and how people are such big fans of hers that they spent so much money, didn't they, on going to her concerts, which left less for other smaller artists coming.
Yeah, so she last toured Australia in 2017 and she notoriously hates flying. So I think a lot of people knew, like, if we're going to see Adele, this is going to be when we see her. She played in Perth, Brisbane, Sydney, Adelaide and Melbourne. She sold over 600,000 tickets. So it doesn't really free up much like disposable income for other artists who may be touring in that time.
Yeah, you've really either got to be in that A group category where your fans are so hardcore but also so widespread, like you have such wide appeal, or it's really hard to make a dent at the moment.
And I think we see that in a lot of like Australian festivals as well. Like we've lost so many. We lost Falls Festival, Splendour in the Grass. And like I think you and I were having a conversation earlier about like that's how we found so many artists, like smaller artists. And that's where you would first like get a taste of them before they get big enough to sell their own stadium shows.
Yes, I remember seeing Billie Eilish at Laneway 2018.
That's
she
crazy.
played Groove in the Moo, which is
Really?
crazy to me now. She headlined Groove in the Moo, I believe it was 2019, which doesn't even feel that long ago. And it's crazy.
It is.
I know.
It really is.
Sad reality.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to think now there are so few of those platforms that people can make that real headway in terms of gathering fans and getting momentum going, that it is hard to imagine someone now going from a festival stage to sold out stadium tours, even though I'm sure it will happen on occasion.
That actually reminds me of when I saw Taylor Swift and she had Sabrina Carpenter as her supporting artist. Now, at this time, I actually didn't know a whole lot about Sabrina Carpenter, and it actually rained so much on the night we went. So we didn't see the opening act, and I didn't actually think twice about it because I hadn't really known much about her. And then Taylor actually ended up bringing her out later and they did a song together. It was really cute. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, she's one of the biggest names in the music industry.
That's one of the few ins we have left. Like one of the biggest artists in the world has to give a formal introduction from you to the world to put you on the map.
It's hard to see the impact on the music industry. And I am such a big advocate for like live music and gigs. Like I'm still out here shelling out my dollars. So I just think it would be really great if, it's hard out here and maybe you don't have money for like those bigger ticket acts, but there are so many more smaller artists, in Australia who are touring, and it's live music. Let's get out there and go see them, guys.
I know you can save money at home and then, have a really good night out, and it's so much less expensive than going to a stadium tour half the time.